and welcome to healthyhouseplants.com, where we teach you all about gardening in the great indoors. If you'd like to support our show, please use our Amazon affiliate link below. Today we have another plant care video for Alocasia, which is commonly called elephant ear. So this plant, as you can see, has arrow-shaped foliage. There are some Alocasias that have more of a heart-shaped foliage. Many are textured, although some also have flat leaves. This one is more of a textured leaf. One thing you can always say for sure is they were always eye-catching. Many have veining, actually most have veining, as you'll see on this one. It has a beautiful veining it's a white color, but it actually has a silvery tint to it. The leaves will come in various colors, various shades of green, white, silver, red, burgundy. And as mentioned, generally speaking, the veining will be a lighter color and then the leaf part will be a darker color. These plants make really good centerpieces in the indoor garden because you just can't help but notice them. They just are real showstoppers. Alocasia is a subtropical plant from Eastern Australia and Asia. The plant grows in nature on the ground floor under a canopy of trees, and for that reason the leaves get very big because they do that to absorb as much sunlight as possible for the plant to photosynthesize and feed itself. Plants feed themselves by photosynthesizing. That's how they get energy. There are varieties of Alocasia with smaller leaves and then ones with quite large leaves. Some of the leaves can even get to as long as 3 to 4 feet long, and the plant itself 15 feet high, while others are considerably smaller. One thing to keep in mind is they are fairly slow growing, so even if you have one that eventually is going to get very large, it's not going to do it that quickly. They do put on a lot of growth every year, but they still won't reach those tremendous sizes that quickly. They grow during the warm months of the year, during spring and summer, and they slow down and even stop growth in the fall and winter months. Okay, so how to keep them healthy and happy. I do have timestamps below if you want to move ahead to another section, such as humidity, etc. I will also be linking any videos I mentioned in this video below. Okay, so lighting. Due to the fact that these plants grow in the understory in their native habitat, they are fairly adaptable to wide types of lighting. So they will grow in low to bright indirect light, which is great news for the houseplant grower because that means they can grow in most homes. However, do keep in mind the more light the plant receives, the more it will grow. If it's in lower light conditions, it's going to grow much more slowly. These plants do very well in an eastern window where they get that nice morning sun that isn't harsh. If you're going to be growing them in a western or southern window, you want to place the plant 3 to 4 feet away from the window because the foliage will burn. And they look unsightly, especially on these big leaves. It really ruins the look of the plant. These plants also do well under full spectrum lighting. When you do on a regular basis, what you want to do to keep them nice and healthy too is to rotate them. So perhaps every time you water, rotate them an 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch. It's very important because you want them to grow evenly on all sides of the plant. If that doesn't happen, the plant will tend to get heavy on one side and it can topple over. So do remember to turn the plant for even light exposure. Watering. Alocasias do best when they're kept evenly moist but not soggy. You want to water when the top inch of soil has dried and the moisture meter reads 4. You do want to cut back on watering during the fall and winter months when the plant isn't actively growing. So at that point, wait until it's getting closer to the 3 on the moisture meter, but don't let it go into the 3 and get get too dried out. You always want to water with warm water any house plants, and especially the Alocasias, which are used to warm temperatures. Okay, so humidity for these plants. So as mentioned, they are an understory plant, and it is more humid down there in the understory. So you want to keep them in the more humid areas of your home, providing those areas have enough lighting for you. And what you want to aim for is 45, 50, 55, 60% humidity. In there is a really nice range. If you have a lot lower than that, or even a little bit lower than that, you're gonna want to provide more humidity. There are several ways that you can provide more humidity. I do have a humidity playlist, and I'm going to mention ways to provide humidity right now as well. You can create a pebble tray for them. I have a video on that. That will give them a little more humidity. You can also mist them throughout the day, periodically throughout the day. That will also humidify them as well. Grouping the plants is a really good way to humidify them, because plants, what they do is they emit water vapor from their leaves, especially from the underside of their leaves where their stomata are. When they emit that water vapor, they humidify the surrounding air, and by humidifying the surrounding air, they humidify any plants next to them. So the more plants you have, the more humid the air is going to be around those plants. So basically, you can get more than one Alocasia or some other types of plants, and they will humidify each other. If you do have really low humidity in your home, then you can also use a humidifier, and I have a video on how to use a humidifier with your houseplants as well. So as mentioned, give them as much humidity as you can. Signs that they're not giving enough humidity is going to be crispy brown edges and brown leaf tips. That is one sign, although it can also be a sign of inadequate watering as well. So you want to check the watering, but that is something that will happen. And the plant just won't be as happy and be growing as happy as it could. Okay, so temperature for these lovely plants. As a subtropical plant, they do prefer it on the warm side, so 65 to 85 degrees is ideal. If you go much lower than 65 degrees, it's not going to be ideal for them, and they're not going to be happy. You also want to avoid putting them in drafty areas, such as near open windows or doors that open a lot, and also away from heating and air conditioning ducts, forced air conditioning and heating ducts, because what happens is that will dry out the air around their leaves and cause problems as well. So that's something else to keep in mind. Now, also keep in mind that they will go dormant in the winter months. So basically, they'll stop growing. That doesn't mean they're going to lose all their leaves, but it does mean that they will pretty much stop growing and just sit there until it gets warm again. And they do tend to put on good growth during the spring and summer months. So even though you're not seeing them doing anything in the cooler months, just know that once it gets warm, they're going to start putting on some really good growth for you. Okay, so fertilizing. You want to feed the plant monthly during its active growth period, spring through summer. Use an organic fertilizer, and don't fertilize during its dormancy in fall and winter. That's very important, because all it will do is just sit there and not do anything, and it can actually be harmful for the roots. So an organic fertilizer, something that is less than 10, 10, 10, those are the numbers on the bottle or the package, 888, 777, 542, etc. Those are good numbers. Just look for something, a nice all-purpose that is organic for sure. Now, also repotting. So these plants, they do like to be a bit on the root bound side, and I do have a video that explains root bound. So that means they'd like to be a little tight in their pot. So so that's how they grow well. However, if you have them in bright light, they're going to be growing pretty vigorously in the spring and summer months, and in that case you're going to need to repot yearly. If you're growing them in lower light, they can go a little bit longer. You want to repot them in a soil that retains moisture and nutrients yet drains well, so something with perlite, pumice for drainage, and also peat moss or coir for the nutrient and water retention. When you're repotting them, they can also be divided. You can carefully separate the roots and divide the plant, and then pot into two different pots or 3 different pots, depending on how big the plant is. This is also a way, as I mentioned, there are ways to manage the size of the plant. And this is one way to do it. You can keep it more to a manageable size if you break up the plant when you do repotting. Some pruning as well can also help keep the plant in a good shape, and also keep the size down as well. Just be careful that you don't over prune. When you do prune, only cut back by 1/3 or less at one pruning, and don't prune again for a few months. So that will help with size control as well. And then the last thing here is pests. Occasionally these plants will attract spider mites, but if you do have spider mites like it really dry conditions. So if you have spider mites, you're probably not keeping the plant as moist as it could be. So if you do proper watering with them, they generally be okay. If you do get some spider mites, you treat with neem oil. Make sure you're watering properly, keeping the conditions moist. Humidity will also help. Spider mites don't like the humidity, so all those things can help. Giving the plant a bath as well will also help with that, to keep things nice and moist, and not a good habitat for spider mites. And there you go for keeping this beautiful, beautiful plant, Alocasia, healthy and happy in your indoor garden. And it's just that I just love to look at this plant because it makes me so happy to see that it's such a tropical, beautiful plant. And like I said, you just can't help but admire it and look at this plant. Thank you for stopping by today. Please leave any comments about any indoor gardening tutorials you'd like to see. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video. And please check the bell if you'd like to be notified when new videos are released.